Thank you for having me today. I'll be talking to you for the first time today and about the local first paradigm. It is kind of a half technical, half philosophical talk. I'm hoping I can find a good hybrid and provide the most value that I can. Usually I give a longer version of this talk. I try to narrow it down as much as I can. Just as a quick show of hands first, who has heard of this term before, the local first paradigm? Just local first is a term? Nobody? Okay, that's good, because there will be a lot of new information for all of you then, I hope. Just a quick primer on myself first, very brief introduction. So my name is Miloš, I go by Mixin everywhere on the web. I'm an engineering manager at SYNCPILOT, where we build software solutions for seamless customer interactions, basically digitally representing consulting intensive processes. And I'd like to start with an anecdote, which is from not this year's, but last year's Local First conference by Chad Fowler. Chad Fowler is the author of The Passionate Programmer and kind of a giant and pioneer in the Ruby community, quite famous in this regard. And he said something 2 years ago at that conference that I haven't forgotten kind of ever since, which is that simply by being here, you're all pioneers. And this kind of is very true to this day still, because this movement and whole paradigm is still very in its early development, and it's kind of a big shift in the web. And especially people like him saying this, having experienced this in the Ruby world like decades ago, I feel like it's sort of telling on where this whole field and paradigm is going. So what does lo-fi software actually mean? Basically, it is a paper. In its essence, lo-fi software, local first software is nothing but a paper and just a rule, basically like a set of rules and principles and values. And in its essence, that's what it is. But I'll elaborate on that in a bit more. So the first rule of the local first paradigm and local first software in general would be that it's fast and it should ideally have no spinners at all. Means that the data is local and there's no waiting for servers. And we have something that is called optimistic UIs, basically leveraging instant feedback. And the user should never have to wait for feedback or for a server response, because the UI optimistically updates, and for the user it makes no difference if it's already on the server side or not, but it feels like it happened immediately. The second rule of local first software would be that it's multi-device. This means that the user's work basically works across multiple devices. And the data is, as I said, stored locally and only synced continuously for backup, technically. Basically, the server and the cloud is just a quick sync between other devices. Ideally, it should also work offline, so the network should be optional. The data syncs automatically when you're online again, and this ideally should work not just for minutes or seconds, but we should be able to work from a train. And when we get back online after an hour or so, the data should converge in a way that just makes sense. So if we're working on the same document and ideally making changes to the same section of a text, it should still converge in a way that makes sense. And this also counts for graphics apps or mind map-like apps or other sort of apps. Seamless collaboration would be the fourth value. That basically means that it enables real-time edits. And as I just said, it can resolve conflicts as they arise. But I will get to this a little bit later. Long-term preservation and longevity is one of the core values as well. This means that ideally the data should be accessible long-term. What does long-term mean? It's independent of companies. So technically you should be able to host the software provided yourself and never lose your data, even if the company goes bankrupt, because the data is, as I said, local first. And if we want to take it that far in the same network, it shouldn't even leave the network. So if you're working on 3 devices in the same network, there's no reason to go to the cloud first. And if the company goes bankrupt, the data is still where it was. Of course, this is no risk of data loss then. Security and privacy by default. You store the data on the devices, ensuring privacy. Often use, of course, end-to-end encryption, ideally at all times. And you often limit server access to the data. User control would be another value and one of the last principles. And that means that basically the data handling is prioritized and the ownership is with the user. Since I don't have much time today, I will be focusing mostly on the first four and trying to get the most value out of these things and provide you with the most value so you can ideally start building, maybe not by the principles local first software, but by the idea local first software. One more thing that I wanted to say is that over the years, it kind of also rebranded a little bit, the local first paradigm. It is not just this rule set of 7 rules and 7 ideals, but basically it kind of rebranded itself in a more philosophical way, taking inspiration from other things like distributed systems. Leslie Lamport once famously wrote, "A distributed system is one in which the failure of a computer you didn't even know existed can render your own computer unusable." And this is also kind of, as I said, now a more philosophical approach for local first, because Martin Klapman, who is one of the founders and one of the writers of the original paper, at the first ever local first conference in 2024 said, "In local first software, the availability of another computer should never prevent you from working." And this year, this May, at the second ever local first conference, he kind of elaborated on this by saying, we don't know yet what works and what doesn't work. There's a standardization process in a few years. And that local first software for him, or for us now, is a value, and that value is empowering users. It's not a binary thing. It's not really about to what degree are we empowering users. All right. This is, as I said, quite a philosophical take now, and there's many still unanswered questions on what local first kind of, not what it is, but how we can actually make it work according to the 7 rules, because it is a really huge endeavor to make something truly local first. I'm not talking about offline first. I'm not talking about real time. I'm talking about the idealization of it and actually having it according to the 7 principles and values, especially taking into consideration things like the ownership part, because we all know that when we use any SaaS, we technically don't own anything. So by definition, the shift is really big. I can highly recommend this panel discussion from this year's Local First conference. It's called The Big Questions of Local First. It's over an hour long. I was there in person. It is really insightful. And basically all the creators or very close collaborators in the Local First software industry are taking part in it and have really interesting things to say. So I'm going to try to simplify this a little bit further if I can, by actually asking what are tools that we know and use that are actually truly local first. So maybe this will help a little bit to make it, let's say, practical. So when we think of local first software, I think what we think of, even though these tools are officially not local first because you don't own your data, etc., as I said. So this is kind of what we're talking about. I'm talking about the instant, immediate apps that feel just amazing, and they sync. You don't know when they sync. Everything is real time. You don't know why, when. You don't know how much data is on your device. You don't know how much data is in the cloud at this time. They just pull what they need, and everything feels like it just works and feels quite amazing. And I would say, to further simplify, Dropbox would be kind of the OG of local first, even though officially you don't own your data. But the thing is actually local first, because in Dropbox, you know how it is. You put something in there, but it's actually on your machine, so it syncs from there, and then it kind of over the wire, you don't know when, it syncs into the cloud, it just magically appears on the other device, and then there it's also kind of, again, local first and the other way around. So I think the analogy here is that it's kind of the OG of this principle, at least. But of course, as I said, none of these tools are local first because you don't own your data. If they go bankrupt tomorrow, I don't know what happens, I guess. Some actually truly local first apps in this case. Does anybody know any of these tools? Raise your hand, please. Okay, that's more than I thought. That's great. So XCaliDraw is just like a mind mapping, architectural diagram, designy tool. By design, by principles, by values, by everything, it is 100% local first, meaning that it fulfills all the paradigms. The code is all encrypted. The code is all open source. You could technically host it yourself immediately. It lives on your machine. It doesn't ever put anything in the cloud if it doesn't have to. And it's actually truly impressive. Anytype is kind of, Anytype and Obsidian are both kind of similar apps like Notion. Obsidian not being local first because it's not open source, but Anytype in this regard would be. In general, I'm not affiliated with Anytype in any sort of way, but I can really recommend for you if you want to like dive deeper into the technical side of local first to look at one of their, I think, 200 repositories that are all just available in public. Every piece of code they've ever written, all of it is just free for you to see, free for you to host on your own, and technically you don't even need their service at all. You can just use this and make it work for yourself anywhere. Really amazing tool. Anybody using this? Who's using Obsidian? Nice. 2 people. Great. One thing to consider, since I have these logos next to each other in this case, if you're thinking about making something work in a local first like way, it would maybe be helpful to consider how you shape your data. Because what all these tools have in common is that they have like an object graph kind of data tree. As you can see, they all have similar data trees. Yeah, and this may be something to consider if you're ever thinking about starting something from scratch that ideally should be local first. It would help if you shape your data in this way. All right, so to sum it all up and briefly kind of go over what I just said. So it's software, it's a set of principles and values. It prefers keeping your data local. Occasionally, it's online to sync, fetch, backup. It's kind of the bleeding edge, although it has come a long way since, like, at least in the last 2 years, so much has happened. It's pretty crazy, to be honest. And yeah, a lot of novel problems and emerging patterns. And it's kind of also a gradual evolving movement. Because when you look at it, I really enjoyed this quote from this year's Local First conference by Aline Wagner, which is last year was more about the why, and this year is more about the how. So why we do it, and this year was more about how we do it. We're in the middle of a paradigm shift, and it's less about the user interface and more about a conceptual interface. So in general, how does the data actually come to the browser, and how do we think about these things, and when do we ever get it out of the browser, why, etc. And it's basically just more of a concept than it was a year ago. And historically, kind of, this might be a hot take, but if you look at the evolution of state transfer and how it has kind of shifted over the years, I would say that this is also kind of basically the end game for state. Because if you look, like, we went from forms to AJAX to REST to GraphQL, and local first in this case means that it basically abstracts all your state transfer fully out of the app code. Because technically, kind of, your database is a representation of your state at the same time. And truly local first apps, and when you take sync engines into consideration, etc., they actually do this in real time based on diffs in the database as well. So when you change something in the database, it will be immediately represented in the UI using, for example, a sync engine. Which brings me to the next short topic that I want to dive a bit deeper into. And that is the concept of sync engines. So sync engines are not officially part of local first or the local first paradigm, but they are kind of a gateway to the mindset of local first apps and in general going into the direction of local first. Because the tools that I just mentioned, like Notion, Linear, etc., they use these technologies. That is kind of, they're based on sync engines. And sync engines in general, yeah, it's a, I would say, an 80-20 solution to a really great experience, but officially not fulfilling all the values. I like kind of referring to this tweet by Hannes Schickling, who's incredibly active in this field, and he's kind of, yeah, one of the pioneers as well. Highly recommend following him. He wrote, not that short ago, over a year ago now, he wrote, most people interested in local first are probably best off with a sync engine building an app that's fully local first, according to the 7 ideals, is a lot more work. And this is coming from somebody who has experiences and is still experiencing it every day, because he's currently building a local first music app. Basically, you can think of it as all the music services in one app, but never dependent on the network, ideally. And he's been working on it for a while, let's say. Peter van Ardenberg, who is one of the co-authors of the original paper, chimed in here and said, I think that as the category matures, it's becoming clear that there are lots of great use cases for apps built around sync engines, and that we still need to do more work. Sorry, that we still have more work to do in order to make local first software easier to build. Year ago has been a year ago. It is now easier to do than a year ago. So there has been a lot of progress. And since this tweet, we've had at least 2 really great new sync engines appear in the market. So there's a lot of progress going on. You can, of course, like Linear did, always roll your own. I would even say that this is where most of their competitive edge came from and why their tool is so amazing. By the way, I'm not in any form affiliated with Linear. I just am a big fan of the product and have always been since day one. And Peter, who's the CTO at Linear, he has this really great talk where he talks about the sync engine, why the very first piece of code he ever wrote for Linear was the sync engine, and kind of how it has improved the developer experience and how they're actually, that's the reason why they're able to ship so fast and ship so well. It is kind of the essence of it. This is, by the way, only the front end. The back end is this part. I'm not going to go deeper into the architecture or anything. I just wanted to leave you with this this little piece, and highly recommend you looking at the YouTube video. As I said, there's so many options these days. I would not go down that road of rolling your own sync engine, because in a way we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. That's still true to this day, even in software, although this code is very old. And since, as I said last year, many things have happened, there's now a really big, amount of sync engines out there that I can highly recommend. I've tried several of them. The second one, Live Store, is by Johannes himself. He kind of, as part of the music app, started writing his own, and it turned into an amazing product that's also open source, based on event sourcing, etc. All of these tools, they differ in all of their approaches mostly. Some are based on CRDTs, some are not. Some are based on server reconciliation. I don't want to go into all the big buzzwords of sync engines, but I can highly recommend you just check out most of them, even compare them. Up to not too long ago, I didn't have a good resource to recommend for comparison reasons, and in general, you just had to go through each and every GitHub on their own and then check. But nowadays, I'm happy to say that I do, which is the local first landscape. This is kind of an accumulator of all things local first. The app itself is local first. And here you can kind of compare the technologies, not just the sync engines, but most technologies that mention local first somewhere. And this table is huge. It goes on for a while. And there's many details for you to look into and compare and eventually evaluate technologies and see what works for you, what might not work for you, etc. The good thing here is you can share this with your colleagues as well, because basically the views are a state, and when you share this link, the other person will see the state you chose. Highly recommend looking into this resource. And the only other thing I want to briefly touch upon is another word you will also hear quite a lot when you dive into local first in the beginning, which is CRDTs. Another quick show of hands. Who has heard this term before? It's also one person. Great, I'm happy to be sharing some new stuff today then. So CRDTs, you can think of CRDTs as basically version control for your data types, because CRDTs are by name conflict-free replicated data types, and they enable real-time collaboration. And you can think of them basically like a Git update, like a Git commit, Git change, Git merge, but it can never have a conflict. That's how the data types, in its essence, how they work. By definition, they're just algorithms with completely different potential implementation ways, types. And yeah, as I said, it's like a merge that can never have conflicts. It can always merge concurrent changes, ensuring consistent state. And it's like a general purpose data structure designed for multi-user environments that is fundamentally local and private by nature. I like reading this quote out every time, which is going back to Git. It's the same as giving every developer a copy of the repository and allowing each developer to make changes locally. At the end of the day, every developer in an organization can merge changes with every other developer, however they like, pairwise, round robin, or through a central repository. Once all merges are complete, every developer will have the same state, assuming merge conflicts were deterministically resolved. Unlike Git, a CRDT wouldn't hit a merge conflict and can merge out-of-order changes. So the biggest example for this would be your text editing app that is real-time, like Google Docs. But we all know how that sometimes works. You're offline, you keep editing, you go back online. It's really just nonsensical stuff. It tries to kind of make it work, but actually not making this work without a CRDT is technically, I would say, almost impossible. But of course, it can be done. But the way to do this, to actually make it fully real-time on a character basis, on like a time basis, on everything, would be to use a CRDT. That's just a visual kind of representation of what I just said. And I'm going to leave you to this, that there's also quite a few, of course, CRDTs and CRDT implementations out there. Who here knows YJS? Just YJS, the second one? Okay, that one has been around for, that's like the jQuery of CRDTs. It's super old. It's like, I think, 15 years old. Still to this day, super maintained and working really well. Auto-merge is kind of it almost sounds funny to say auto-merge is the emerging technology, but it's kind of up and coming because it's also by the people at Ink and Switch at the lab who wrote the official paper. And yeah, there's a different, the third link is just different implementation types of CRDTs because, as I said, in the end, they are just an algorithm. Some sync engines use CRDTs under the hood, others don't. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, because the experience for the user in the end ultimately will be the same. You should, for yourself, just evaluate if you sometimes might be just good to go with just a CRDT without having to pull in a sync engine. As I said before, also here, the local first landscape is a great resource to compare these technologies and the CRDTs, as well as the sync engines, as well as many other technologies that mention local first or play into this whole game. All right. Closing thoughts. There's way more to talk about that I haven't at all mentioned that falls into the lo-fi local first macrocosm, like version control, etc. And many, many, many more open questions that I also won't be getting into. But I have some great resources for you to share after my talk. One that I can recommend just real quick is the Local First podcast, also by Hannes Schickling, and basically interviewing all pioneers of this movement, I would say. Highly recommended. And yeah, that's kind of my closing thoughts. So that we can basically go from this to what we currently... Oh, image is not loaded? Oh no, the Wi-Fi gave up on me just in my last two slides. That's kind of unfortunate. All right, I'm sorry about that. I have a very nice animation where you can see... Is it actually not showing? It's showing on my screen. I don't know why it's showing here. So it says direct to cloud, and then you have a no one in between last GIF. It's kind of ruined my last moment. All right. Thank you so much.